You never lose a narcissist suddenly. He doesn't just wake up one morning and walk away. Long before he leaves, his behavior changes in ways so subtle that, unless you know what to look for, you'll blame yourself instead of seeing the truth. The silence that feels colder than rejection. The compliments that turn into small cuts disguised as jokes. The way he slowly pulls back, not with honesty, but with calculated absence. These are not random moods. They are the unconscious strategy of someone whose love was never love, but a transaction. Carl Jung once said that the shadow always reveals itself in the cracks of our relationships, and the narcissist's shadow leaves traces, quiet, poisonous signs that he's already preparing his exit. In this video, I'll reveal the 7 silent signals a narcissist shows before he discards you, and once you see them, you'll never doubt yourself again. There is a question that many women, silently, have asked themselves in front of the mirror, or in the solitude of their room. How is it possible that a man who seemed completely obsessed with me suddenly becomes cold, distant, almost like a stranger, and then disappears without any explanation? That's the invisible wound that hurts more than abandonment itself. Confusion. Because it's not just the departure that hurts, it's the inconsistency that hurts, the emptiness of not knowing what happened. What at first seemed like an intense, almost magnetic love, with sweet words, promises, and looks, filled with desire, slowly begins to transform into an emotional dessert. The same man who called you every day now takes hours, even days, to answer. The man who said you were unique begins to treat you as if you were expendable. And that's when many women make the mistake of thinking, I did something wrong. Something in me was not enough. But the truth is different. In the case of a man with narcissistic traits, none of this happens by chance. Before he leaves, there are always silent signs, small cracks in the wall of his false intensity that reveal what's really happening. He's not leaving you because you failed, but because his ego no longer feeds on your energy like it did in the beginning. Carl Jung would explain it in a brutally clear way. This is the manifestation of the shadow. The narcissist projects onto you everything he denies in himself. At first, he idealizes you because you represent the part of him he desires. But when that projection runs dry, when the mirror stops, reflecting what his ego wants to see, the shadow begins to take control. And at that moment, the man who seemed to love you without limits begins to withdraw, to punish you with silence, to criticize you coldly, to prepare, without saying anything, to escape. It's not about love, it's about an unconscious power dynamic. And the real pain is that if you don't recognize those signs, you may end up believing the abandonment was your fault. But the reality is that those signs are warnings. The narcissist's shadow is already silently showing you that he's leaving. At first, everything seems like a dream. The narcissist appears in your life as if they've been waiting for you forever. Their words are sweet, their attention intense, their gaze fixed on you as if you were the center of the universe. They tell you that you're different, that they've never met anyone like you, that they feel something with you they've never experienced before. In a matter of weeks, they manage to build a connection that in other relationships takes months or years. That's the first trap. Intensity. This phenomenon is called love bombing, and although it may feel like true love to you, it's actually an unconscious validation strategy. He doesn't do this because he loves you deeply, but because he needs your energy to inflate his fragile self-image. Carl Jung would say that in that moment, he's projecting onto you everything he yearns for from his own shadow: security, vitality, courage. You become his ideal mirror. That's why he seems almost obsessed at first, because in reality, he's not seeing you. He's seeing what his ego thinks it finds in you. Every compliment, every gesture of devotion, every exaggerated promise has a hidden meaning, absorbing your light to soothe the inner emptiness that has always haunted him. And you, as a sensitive and emotional woman, Interpret that intensity as genuine love. How could you not? Everything in his body language screams passion. But what you don't know at that moment is that his energy isn't stable. It doesn't come from deep love, but from a desperate need to sustain himself through you. This is the narcissist's pattern. First, they elevate you, place you on a pedestal, and make you feel indispensable. But sooner or later, this idealization becomes a burden. When your humanity begins to reveal itself as it truly is, with virtues and flaws, the spell is broken. What was once adoration transforms into criticism, coldness, and detachment. Because it wasn't love. It was hunger. Hunger for your feminine energy, for your surrender, for your constant validation. And when that energy no longer satisfies him, the cycle of withdrawal begins. The pattern is always the same: intensity, absorption, exhaustion, and finally, abandonment. The narcissist never leaves suddenly. Their withdrawal begins subtly, almost invisibly, like a fog that slowly invades the relationship. At first, they were the person who responded immediately, who seemed attentive to every detail, who could even inundate you with messages and calls. But suddenly, that intensity fades. The responses arrive later and later, shorter, colder, and without realizing it, you begin to feel invisible. This change is no coincidence. The narcissist's silence is a tool of control. It's not that he's busy or distracted. It's a silent punishment, a way to withdraw attention from you so that you yourself begin to seek him out, to insist, to doubt yourself. In psychology, this is called intermittent reinforcement, giving and taking away from someone what they want until they become addicted to validation. Carl Jung would have seen the shadow in action here. The narcissist projects his fear of abandonment, but transforms it into power. He abandons you first, even if only symbolically. He leaves you waiting, not because he doesn't have time, but because he needs to remind you that he controls the emotional distance. That silence cuts deep. Because arguing isn't the same as being suspended in nothingness. An argument at least has words, even harsh ones. Silence, on the other hand, is a void that screams louder than any insult. And the most painful thing is how that void begins to make you believe you are the cause. You begin to analyze every word, every gesture, every detail, looking for where you messed up. But that's the trick. The narcissist knows that while you're exhausted trying to decipher his silence, he maintains control. He knows. Your mind will fill the void with anxiety, guilt, and need. And that's where his strategy works. The more invisible he makes you feel, the more visible his power over you becomes. Strategic silence is, in reality, a non-verbal statement. I decide when you exist and when you don't. And if you don't recognize it, you may end up adapting to that emotional abuse as if it were normal. Because a narcissist's silence isn't absence, it's manipulation. And it's the first sign that they're already preparing the ground to leave. After the silence, another silent but devastating sign appears. The narcissist begins to minimize your value. He does it so subtly at first that you might even mistake it for innocent jokes or constructive comments. However, behind those seemingly harmless words lies a cruel strategy: to dismantle everything he once admired about you. In the first stage, he praised your appearance, celebrated your intelligence, and applauded your accomplishments. He made you feel unique, almost irreplaceable. But when his shadow begins to loom over the relationship, that admiration turns into criticism. What was once a compliment is now a flaw. Your way of dressing, which once fascinated him, now strikes him as exaggerated or unattractive. Your intelligence, which inspired him, is now arrogance. Your successes, which filled him with pride, become a source of mockery or disguised envy. Carl Jung would explain this phenomenon as a mechanism of projection. The narcissist, doesn't criticize you for who you really are, but because what he sees in you reflects the part of himself he despises most, his own insecurity, his own unintegrated shadow. Every time he belittles you, he's really talking about himself, not you. But his psychological game is so subtle that he manages to make you believe the flaws lie within you. And here's the most painful part. When you constantly receive such criticism, you slowly begin to doubt yourself. You now look at the dress that once made you feel beautiful with insecurity. You keep quiet about the brilliant idea you were going to share for fear of being judged. You no longer enjoy the achievement you achieved at work because you're afraid he'll turn it into a cause for discussion. That's exactly what he's after, to weaken your self-esteem so he can maintain control. Because the less valuable you believe you are, the more dependent you'll be on his validation. And in that dependence, he reaffirms his power. Minimizing your worth isn't an accident, it's a sign. A sign that the love that seemed unconditional is turning into covert contempt. And the harsh truth is, he's not talking about your fault, but about his own. Because what he can't accept in himself, he projects onto you. One of the most painful and disconcerting signs that the narcissist shows before leaving is the appearance of subtle comparisons with other women. At first, you were his absolute focus. No one else existed. No one could match you. But over time, he begins to insert names into the conversation, seemingly casual references to friends, co-workers, or even strangers. He does it naturally, as if he doesn't mean to hurt you, but the message is planted. There is someone who could be better than you. He mentions an ex-partner and suddenly remembers some detail about her that sounds like a compliment. He comments on a woman he saw on the street, on television, or on social media, highlighting attributes he doesn't emphasize about you. At first, it seems insignificant, even harmless, but with each comparison, your self-esteem begins to crumble. Carl Jung would explain this dynamic as a game of projection and manipulation. The narcissist isn't really admiring these women. What he's doing is using the image of the other as a mirror to show you what you supposedly lack. It's not about them, it's about controlling you. His unconscious goal is to weaken your security and keep you in a constant state of doubt. Could it be that I'm not enough anymore? These comparisons are poison disguised as casual comments. With every word, he erodes your inner worth. He forces you to compete with phantoms, with idealized figures who probably don't even exist in the way he presents them. And the more you fight to prove your worth, the more power you give him. The most perverse thing is that these comparisons are often not overt. They are subtle insinuations. She's a good listener. She's more down to earth. She takes better care of herself. Small phrases, but loaded with meaning. And even though they hurt you, you end up keeping quiet because you don't want to appear insecure or jealous. That's precisely where he gains ground. While you remain silent, he consolidates his psychological dominance. The truth is, these comparisons never speak to your lack of worth. They speak to their emptiness. The narcissist needs to undermine your self-esteem to sustain the illusion of superiority. And when he starts mentioning other women, he's not doing it to admire them. He's doing it to make you start doubting yourself. That's his way of preparing the ground before he leaves. After the silences and comparisons, a sign emerges that at first glance can confuse you: absence disguised as occupation. The narcissist begins to fill his diary with excuses. He talks about endless work, unavoidable commitments, and a tiredness that leaves no room for anything else. And although his words sound reasonable, what's really happening is a silent withdrawal. He's not withdrawing due to lack of time. He's withdrawing because his emotional energy with you is already fading. At the beginning of the relationship, he seemed to have all the time in the world. He could stay up all night with you, change his routine, reorganize his life just to see you. But suddenly, every encounter becomes complicated. every conversation requires waiting. Every plan is left unfinished. What was once a priority is now replaced by any excuse, and you, trying to understand, begin to accept these excuses as if they were true. Carl Jung would call this a withdrawal of psychic energy. The narcissist's unconscious mind is already looking for another setting, another source of validation. Not necessarily another person immediately, but another place where they can continue to feed their ego. What happens is that once the initial projection onto you is exhausted, their mind no longer finds satisfaction in your company. That's why they distance themselves under the guise of obligation. The most painful thing about this stage is that there's no clear breakup, no honest explanation. There's only a progressive absence. You perceive that their body is present, but their soul is elsewhere. They talk to you, but don't listen. They look at you, but don't see you. And this disconnection, little by little, erodes your emotional security. The danger is that you start justifying it yourself. He's tired, he's overworked, he'll soon be back to normal. However, the pattern is always the same. When a narcissist disguises himself as busy, he is actually already withdrawing emotional investment from the relationship. The truth is stark. Their absence isn't due to external commitments, but to an internal abandonment that has already begun. It's the narcissist's shadow moving toward another source of energy, while you're left waiting for someone who, although still by your side, has already quietly left. One of the most painful and difficult signs to ignore is the disconnection in intimacy. The narcissist who initially seemed obsessed with every part of you, who looked at you as if you were an irreplaceable treasure, and who turned every encounter into a spectacle of intensity, begins to reveal an emptiness that is impossible to hide. Suddenly, in the closest moments, he's no longer present. His body may be right next to yours, but his mind wanders elsewhere. He avoids your gaze, turns his face away, maintains an awkward silence, or stares into space as if trapped in his own thoughts. What was once a fiery connection now feels mechanical, distant, and soulless. Even sex, which at first was passionate and energetic, begins to become routine, cold, and devoid of real commitment. Carl Jung would describe this as a withdrawal of the projection. In the initial phase, the narcissist had placed in you everything he longed for and needed to see from himself: vitality, love, acceptance. But when that projection is broken, he no longer recognizes himself in you and therefore no longer finds the same fascination. The result is an emotional void that translates into intimacy as distance, coldness, and lack of connection. For you, this disconnection isn't just physical, it's deeply emotional. Because it's not just about less intense caresses or fewer kisses, it's the absence of the soul in the encounter. And that absence, even if it's not mentioned, hurts more than explicit rejection. It makes you wonder, what did I do wrong? Why doesn't he want me the same way anymore? The truth is, it's not about you, it's about him. The narcissist no longer sees you as his primary source of energy. His unconscious is searching for new stimuli, new forms of validation, and that's why intimacy with you loses strength. Not because you've changed, but because his shadow no longer feeds in the same way. Disconnection in intimacy is a silent confession. He's already begun to leave, even if he doesn't say so yet. And acknowledging this is painful, but also liberating, because it reveals a truth you shouldn't ignore. The problem isn't your lack of worth, it's his inability to love authentically. There comes a time in a relationship with a narcissist when the words change so subtly that, if you're not paying attention, you might not notice right away. At first, everything was us. We're going to travel. We're going to make it. Our future will be incredible. That joint construction was part of the initial spell, making you believe you were building a life project together, that he saw you as his ideal partner. But little by little, that language is changing. What was once plural begins to become singular. It no longer speaks of we, but now of I. I have the work plans. I'm thinking about moving. I want to change course. Without including you, without consulting you, without making room for your presence in those plans. This transition from us all day, it's not an accident. It's a sign that the bond you seem to be building is now dissolving in your mind. Carl Jung would explain it as the breaking of unconscious contract. In the initial phase, the narcissist idealized you, projecting the bright side of his own shadow onto you. In doing so, he created an invisible contract in which he needed you as a reflection to sustain his ego. But when that projection wears thin and he no longer receives the same validation from you, that contract breaks. And with it, the we narrative breaks down as well. For you, this change is disconcerting. You notice that he no longer includes your opinions, that he avoids talking about the future, that he makes plans without telling you. What once seemed like a shared story becomes a monologue where you are merely a spectator. And this exclusion hurts more than what is actually said, because he's not only leaving you out of his words, he's also leaving you out of his inner world. The change of narrative is a way of preparing for abandonment without admitting it. It's as if they begin to erase your place in their life little by little, until one day the breakup seems natural, almost inevitable. But the truth is that this I that replaces the we doesn't speak of autonomy, but of disconnection. It's evidence that the narcissist no longer sees you as part of their future, because they're unconsciously looking for another stage on which to project their ego. The end of a relationship with a narcissist rarely comes quietly. Before they leave, there is usually unexpected explosion, a pointless argument, a conflict created out of thin air. The funny thing is that this isn't a genuine argument about a real problem. It's actually a carefully crafted excuse to justify his departure. Suddenly, he starts blaming you for absurd things, a misinterpreted gesture, a word taken out of context, a minor decision that he turns into an insult. He distorts what you say, exaggerates your mistakes, and accuses you of being difficult, selfish, or impossible to deal with. And the most painful thing is that, for a moment, you manage to believe him. You wonder if maybe you really exaggerated, if you are responsible for the tension that surrounds you. But here's the truth. It's not about you. The narcissist needs to fabricate a narrative that absolves him of blame. He can't bear to face the fact that he was the one who drained the relationship, the one who withdrew his energy, the one who stopped loving authentically. So he invents a reason that allows him to leave as a victim rather than an executioner. It's his way of maintaining the illusion of moral superiority. Carl Jung would explain it as a defense mechanism of the shadow. The narcissist doesn't want to acknowledge his inability to sustain the bond, so he projects that shadow onto you. Everything he doesn't accept about himself, his inconstancy, his coldness, his selfishness, he turns into an accusation against you. Thus, the burden is shifted and he is freed from the weight of guilt. That unexpected outburst is the prelude to abandonment. It's the final scene that sets the stage for his departure, and although it may hurt, it's important to see it for what it truly is: an act of emotional manipulation. It's not confirmation of your inadequacy, it's confirmation of his inability to love without destroying. The paradox is that while you're left trying to figure out what you did wrong, he's already feeling relief. Because in his mind, the fabricated fight justifies him. Now he has a reason to leave with good reason, and you're trapped in a labyrinth of doubts that never really belong to you. The unexpected outburst isn't your fault. It's the narcissist's last act before he leaves. After going through these 7 silent signs, there is something very important left to say. None of this is your failure. It doesn't mean you weren't enough, or that you didn't deserve love. These signs aren't a reflection of your worth, but rather the inevitable pattern of a narcissist. What you experienced as abandonment was actually confirmation of something that was present from the beginning. He was never emotionally involved with you. He was only projecting, only seeking from you what his ego needed to inflate. Carl Jung expressed it masterfully. What we reject in ourselves, we project onto others. That's what he did with you. At first, he idealized you because he needed to see in you the light he couldn't find within himself. But as his shadow grew stronger, he stopped recognizing himself in you, and so began the cycle of silence, criticism, and comparisons. He didn't leave because you failed. He left because he never knew how to love from an authentic place. The real way out, and this is the point of empowerment, is not to try to hold him back or beg for the crumbs of attention he offers. The way out is to look at the experience as a mirror, because with his shadow, he showed you where you still need to assert yourself, where your self-esteem needs to be strengthened, and where your self-love must grow. The narcissist didn't come to demonstrate your inadequacy. He came, unknowingly, to show you how much you need to recover your inner power. And that power isn't in him or in what he does or doesn't do. It's in you, in the decision to never again allow someone to feed their ego with your pain, in the ability to recognize that you deserve real love, not a theater of projections, in the strength to choose your peace over their chaos. Because in the end, the question that changes everything isn't why he left, but what you'll do with what you now know. And now that you know these signs, the real challenge lies ahead. Will you continue to allow someone to use your light to cover their shadow, or is it time to take back your power and write a new story for yourself?